Hey, everyone out there. This is my second stream in not that much amount of time. You may be wondering what is going on. Well, right now, what is going on, in case you have been totally ignored by my algorithms, I've been being super annoying all month about this Splice competition that I'm doing. And it's because there's awesome prizes and I want everyone to enter. And the whole point of this competition is to be less of a competition than a collaboration, which is why all month we've been having feedback streams, we've been having sound design challenges, we've been having all kinds of stuff going on, and I know that a lot of you have been enjoying it, but if you're tuning in from Facebook or YouTube or Twitch and you have no idea what's going on, join us in Discord. I am not in my own Twitch chat channel. I am just talking in the Discord. So if you're not in there, get in there. And send me your whips. So today's stream is all about kind of last minute feedback because the deadline for the contest is coming up in a couple of weeks. Wait, 1 week. No, 3 days. I don't know what day it is. It's the 1st. What day is it today? 27th. All right, you can tell that maybe I haven't left the house. Why did I say that? Anyways, so we've got a few whips to start. And I'm going to go through them. So our first whip is going to be from Patrick Schuyler, and it is a Splice entry, so I'm super stoked to hear it, and let's see how it is. Start that again. Really like what you've done with using the vocal chops as like a percussive element. That's really cool. Getting roasted by Admiral Bumblebee. What is up? Cool. So first off the bat, I really like the foundation you have. I think it's like super like clean, and the groove is really nice. It's super creative use. I'm a huge fan, as many of you know, of using vocals as percussion, because I'm a fan of using anything for percussion that's not percussion, because we've all heard a hi-hat, but have you heard a crushed up water bottle thrown against a tree while being stepped on, etc.? So I really like hearing interesting percussion elements like that. And I really like the top end of your bass. It's crispy, it's heavy. Like, this is a super good energy for like festival mid-set vibe. I would totally, like, I could see myself playing this. As far as criticism, I would actually just say that you have to make a choice. There's like fine line between being spacious and minimal and interesting and being boring. And it's tough, right? Because especially when you're learning, it's really, really easy to like fill up your track with a ton of pads and atmospheres and pianos and stuff. And then it gets murky. And that's what I used to do, being a piano player, which is not what you're doing. But what you're doing is the other thing. You're trying to create this minimal vibe, and you've got it on the space. But I think if you're going to do that, you have to do a lot more subtle little textural edits so that you can keep that amount of space, but make it interesting to listen to. So it's almost like an illusion. It's like, you know, drum and bass was really big for ghost notes. And if any of you don't know the concept of ghost notes, they're sort of like very quiet, sometimes almost unnoticeable accent notes or beats that are in there that you can't consciously hear, but somehow your brain gets it and it keeps the momentum going. So I think that I really like the textures and the elements, and I wouldn't add a bunch more stuff necessarily because you've got a really good clean space. But what I would do is start messing, you know, in between bars to create, like, you could make a really interesting transition, having that percussion repeat and then be stretched out, be kind of granular, or like sweeping a little FM filter on it. There's a lot of cool ways that you can use the palette of sounds that you have and not sacrifice the spaciousness and the cleanliness, but still provide something interesting. So yeah, that's a really good start though. I mean, or not even start, I would say that's close to being finished. Like, this is the point where I would just sort of hang around in the studio and jam with it, get myself really hyped up, and then be like, what is going to push this energy over the edge? Or what is going to keep somebody that's not me interested in continuing to hear this track? Because the way it is now, I totally like it. Like, I would probably put it in a set, but I would mix in and out of it fairly quickly because it doesn't change that much. So that would be it on that one. But good job, Patrick Schuyler, and good luck. Our next submission or listening thing, let us see what we've got. Well, we've got Auver, I'm sorry, Auver, Lively. Let me just get that up. And it is actually already entered in the Splice contest, so I'm going to play it off of Splice. So let's check it out.
Time is ticking so slowly, like I'm trapped in this hourglass, caught in the past. No regrets here, but every move that I make makes me feel like I'm on blast. Think that you can never show me, you don't even really know me. Never paid attention to the slightest thing I need. Now the doors always fast closing. think that you can never show me. You don't even really know me. Never paid attention to the slightest thing I need. Now the doors are way past closing, and my path already chosen. I'm so numb that I can't breathe. I'm living lifeless.
Okay. Ooh, that is a very long and very spacious outro. I feel like I just successfully landed my spaceship, and now I can take a couple of weeks off. Admiral has been commenting a lot of the things, same things that I would think. Get in the chat, those of you who are not. We are having an interesting discussion here as well. I'm not just sitting here silently. The first thing is, yes, as Admiral pointed out, that is a little bit overcompressed. And yes, there's a loudness war going on. It's a thing. But you know what? The crazy thing that's happening right now is because of Spotify and platforms like this all kind of adopting this quieter standard, which is like, I think it's -9 LUFS or something, or is it -14? It's lower than you would think, and as Auver said in the chat, dubstep producers are always trying to be especially loud. And the thing about that, and Mr. Bill actually showed me this, is that when you overcompress something and then you get turned down by something like the Spotify gain stage, your stuff actually comes across as weaker and flabbier. And it's pretty crazy because I was having this exact same quandary with a mixdown, and I went over to Bill's studio and listened on his barefoots, and he said, look, ease up on it, because look, here's mine. Mine is, -9 LUFS, and listen to what happens when they turn them quieter. And the one with the more dynamic range will give you that feeling of being louder because it's actually punching you. It's giving you a contrast. It's like that age-old superhero cliche where you have to have the villain to have the good guy. Otherwise, everybody would just be sort of mediocre. So it's kind of the same thing with acoustic space. If everything is loud, then nothing is loud because it's too loud, so it's almost quiet. So essentially, I would say, oh man, I'm getting roasted by Admiral. I'm going to read his comments out loud because I have no fear. Listen to Alicia. She's an expert on weak and flabby. Oh man. I look forward to the day when I can just floss and fly out to Admiral's place and we can host like a dual podcast and be like Angel and Deviling out. And for now, he's just going to roast me. But anyways, my other feedback on this. So Auver, I know you've already submitted this, but you said you might be down to redo the mastering. So I would give you some quick advice. And this is a thing that happens with vocals, especially women with vocals, I would say, in my range, or men with high voices. Like I have what I would consider to be a low mid range. If you're EQing my voice and you've been playing around with the pack, you might notice that I have a big sort of bump around 800 hertz. And then, some higher mid stuff too. And so what I almost end up doing with my own voice is to cut those low mid 800, well, low mid for my voice, that is, I guess you'd consider that a high mid, whatever, apples and oranges. But what I would first do is maybe cut a little bit more of that in my voice and do a tiny bit of boost on the highs, because that will make it a little airier and brighter and sparkle up. Then I would really try maybe playing with some mid side chaining EQ. And for those of you who haven't tried that, it's a really good thing to do if you're working with vocals and leads because it's very tricky. EDM-ish stuff by nature has very mid-rangey, big present leads. And the problem with that is they tend to sit right here. Let's say this is like 1K, and guess where my voice is? It's in the same place. So it can be hard to have big synth pads like the ones that you have going, plus have my vocal in a relatively mid-range thing because you've got two elements. It's almost like how your kick and your sub fight together. So what I would suggest is doing a mid dip on your pads. And you don't even have to do this overall. In fact, I would recommend against it. I would sidechain the activation of that to my voice. So then when your big intro is coming in with these pads, let's see, I closed it already. Whoops. Anyways, when the big intro is coming in with the pads, you can do a mid scoop around, between 800 hertz to 1K, play around with it. And you could have that only trigger when my voice hits. So that's one thing you can do to make space, because then my voice will sit in the middle, and you can even boost the EQ on the sides of your pads, and that will make them big and stereo and sort of framing my voice. So that's one approach to working with vocals. The other thing that you could also do is a pop trick that I actually learned from some mixing engineers that I've worked with in the UK, and they do a lot of pop stuff. And what they told me to do is when you got a lot of pads, strings, when you have a huge audio bed like that, the best thing to do when you have a vocal like mine that's going to need some space is to create a bus where all of your high melodic things go. Like, let's say you've got violins, you've got synths, you've got whatever, all of the stuff that's in that same range, and sidechain compress my voice or whoever's voice to those pads. So sounds kind of harsh, but if you do it right, nobody will notice, and it'll just be this very much like my voice hits and it carves out that little amount of volume and creates room. So my biggest criticism of you is just that you need to create more space so that the ears don't get fatigued, because I think it's partially your overcompression, but partially the amount of elements that's all sitting in that mid-range space. So if I'm singing and your pads are going and everything's going you got to make some room. So that is what I would do with that. So next, we are going to go, we have a couple of whips that are not related to the comp, and I will definitely get to them, but I said I would prioritize the comp ones. So we're going to go to, let's see, we've got Mellow Music, and it's called Outline the Skies Remix, which is cool. Let's see, so we're going to play that off SoundCloud now.
October sky, fumbling, lost all track of space and time, and I know how things must seem so fragile in our shell. Be
Okay. So I got a lot to say about that one. Um, so yeah, there is, first of all, there's no bass. I don't know if you know this. I don't know if you have um, like not good headphones or anything, but there's like almost absolutely no low end. And Nathaniel actually put it very succinctly. He said it's like I'm listening to it on earbuds, but with my headphones. So yeah, overall, um, I sense there's like a lot of kind of improper reverb. I'm going to go through and pick through it again, but there's a lot of strange space. Like, as Admiral says, sounds like someone's playing a sick track in front of me and someone's off singing in the bathroom across the hallway. Oh, I wasn't even looking at him saying there's too many verbs, and I said, oh, great minds think alike. There's too many verbs, different spaces. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's like you're kind of you're shifting between different dimensions and you're in a bunch of space. And look, I love reverb too, I promise, but you have to be very careful with it. And generally, it's always better to use a little bit too little than too much because that is going to hog your space. If you really love reverbs, a fun trick that you can try is to gate your reverb to another element. So you could have like a huge reverbing pad that gets crushed down as soon as the kick hits. And then you actually get a really nice pulsing bonus feeling. So that's really cool. But okay, the biggest problem I have is that the lyrics, the melody, the whole thing is in the wrong place. And look, I know it's a sample pack. You can totally use it however you want. But the thing is, because I sing, I guess I would call it a jazzy R&B style. I'm sliding into notes and I'm playing with my time a bit. So if you line up the first word on the wrong beat, there's going to be a lot of it that starts to sound off because even though it's still technically in time, it's like you've taken me from the middle of a bar and you've put it in. So let me go back to yours and let me show you what the problem is. Let's see. Okay, so right off the bat, you've started trembling on beat one, and this is something unbelievable that I think I have to explain to people who haven't worked with vocals much. Let me tell you a huge secret. Songs don't always start their lyrics on the first beat. So, which is crazy. Everybody just assumes that my first word is hitting on it, but that's not how it goes. It goes, let me see. I'm going to try and get some piano out of Ableton here. I've had to do a lot of very strange loopback stuff, but let me just see if that works. Nope. Let's see if this works. Okay. I'm just going to play these as beats. Trembling, air feels like October skies. So it's one and, right? Fumbling, lost all track of space and time. So 4 and 1 and. So that is your biggest problem, is that all these verse lyrics that are supposed to start on the, yeah, I know, I'm barely hanging on by the skin of my teeth to keep this working because this is not happy. I will fix it better for next time. But anyways, so now remember, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, trembling. If you just move trembling to the and, the in-between of the 1 and 2, totally do whatever else you want, cut up the phrases, but in order for them to all stay in time and sound like they fit into any cohesive song, you have to at least start the word on the right beat. You know what I mean? So that was just the thing that bugged me out the most from the start. And the thing is, you might think, oh, she's just being really OCD because she made the song and, it's never going to sound right. But it's not that. I mean, even other people listening, what they're hearing is something that sounds a little bit out of time. So what I would say with that is totally, keep the phrases sort of in the relative places they are. That's fine. That's certainly, it's not a thing. but really try and move the words to sort of the right part of the beat, and you're going to find the whole song is going to sit a lot better. So that's the first thing you should do. And then next, these pads are really thin. Where is it? I mean, the whole thing is really thin. So I think what will really help is just overall, like, look at all your channels, because your drums, you have some really nice crispiness on the high end, but you don't have any low end. So everything is just, your whole track and your mix is shifted into being super sharp. So I think if you just start really, like, maybe if you don't have good bass where you are, just try to make use of some of your analyzers. Run analyzers on groups. That can really help. Like, I don't know how you organize your tracks, but I usually have my drums going into one bus and my, pads and melodics and percussion. And so if I'm having a hard time judging something like low end and I'm not in a good environment, I can at least get partway there by going, okay, let me run an analyzer on the whole track. Okay, that's a little light. Now I'm going to analyze these groups of channels. Oh, I can see where here I've got a lot of sharpness on the drums. And remember, if you don't do your mix EQ right and you try to just throw the thing into a limiter, you're just going to push the worst elements upward. So, yeah, I think definitely keep going with that. I really, really liked about it, and I should say this because I am not like a total jerk. What I really liked about it is you made some really interesting chord choices and melodic choices against the vocal. It was unexpected, but it was still cohesive. So as a piano player, I super appreciate when I hear a really good chord progression that I wouldn't expect or predict, and it still works and it still sounds natural, because a lot of the time you either have people doing just super predictable, same old, or you have people trying to be weird and avant-garde, and it's just unlistenable. So I think that you hit the sweet spot with your melodic idea, and you could definitely work on this and make it into something viable, but you really need to focus on not even just your low end, your mids too. Like the whole thing, if I were to draw a picture of the EQ, it would be, well, this is mirror image, but all right, there we go. It would be like this, like from low to high. So really just work on rounding it out. And remember, especially with electronic music, that kick and the sub and your low end and your punchiness, it's crazy how that can make such a difference. Even if you have the best melodic idea in the world, it's just when you're trying to do it in an electronic context and you have no low end, it really loses steam fast. So keep going on that for sure. Next one we are going to do is going to be, what is this called? Yes, please. Yes, please. Yes, please. I don't know. So we're going to check out LA Whip 77. Great title.
If you want it, you can feel it in LA. If you need it, you can feel it in LA. If you dream it, you can feel it in LA. Feel it in LA. Feel it in LA. Feel it.
Sorry, my buffer is going to do something horrendous. I'm just going to reload this page because like something is going super spoofy, and I can hear that your whip is actually really dope. So I don't want to mess it up. Give me a second. Hey, this is supposed to be fiber optic. Nice job. Sponsored by CenturyLink. All right, let me just rewind that. I'm just going to cross my fingers and hope that my yes.
If you want it, you can feel it in LA. If you need it, you can feel it in LA. If you dream it, you can feel it in LA. Feel it in LA. Feel it in LA. Feel it in LA. If you need it, you can feel it in LA. If if you dream it, you can feel it in LA. 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 Feel it in LA.
This makes me smile a lot because, again, I definitely have a bias towards super interesting melodic ideas, being a piano player, and I love all the ideas that you have. Like every time you introduce a new idea, I was like amazing. The only well, I have a few little, and this is all picky feedback because I feel like honestly, everything sounds pretty great. You've got a really nice texture, you've got a nice noise layer, really beautiful melodic ideas. But you're kind of at that point that I get to where you're like, wow, I have four amazing ideas. How do I put them all together into something that isn't totally ADD? Because I almost feel like you've made like two really dope tracks. And that's, again, this is like a personal choice because I've done the same thing. In fact, I was actually just looking through my own catalog after realizing this grievous mistake I made that I will share with everyone on stream, where I signed up for Sound Exchange in 2011. I told everyone to get on it, put my catalog in there, and never updated it again. Then the other day I started wondering why I hadn't been paid for anything that was newer than 7 years old. And now I know it's because I was supposed to do it. Anyways, in the meantime, I had to go through my whole catalog and catch up, and I listened to some of my older stuff, and this was kind of the stuff I heard, like the problems with mine was a lot of the time there were like three amazing ideas and I could have actually made them into three different songs, but instead I tried to make this really crazy complicated song. And look, I mean, there's a couple different ways you can go. You can be somebody like Mr. Bill, and his whole thing, I know I keep talking about him, but it's because he's the homie. His whole thing is that he's really exciting and erratic in it, and his songs don't repeat a lot, and he has a cult fan base for that. But I would say, speaking in general terms, a lot of people, they would rather, like, for re-listening purposes and for memory and for feeling like a connection to a song, they would rather have one cohesive, really strong idea and some variations on that. Because to me, I hear like, oh, you've made this awesome, like, what do they call it, wave or chill trap thing, like, oh, this part,
If you want it, you can feel it in LA if you need.
And that's great. And then you have this like insane, dope, like Cashmere Cat, jukey, where is it?
Feel it.
and again, it's not, this is like minor criticism. I'm not saying it's like two separate ideas. I just think that they're such good ideas that they almost deserve their own tracks. Like you could go to a couple different ways. You could put 2 edits out of this, which is kind of a cool, I think, promo thing. And it's sort of a throwback from the old days of vinyl where, you would have an A side and a B side, or you would have like the original and the remix. And you could actually put out a little like 2-track single where you're like, this is the chill version, this is the club edit. Because I really like that kind of stuff, especially as a working, DJ. If I listen to your chill part of your track and I'm like, this is gorgeous, but like, I can't play that at midnight. But if you developed your footwork idea into a like banging dance version of this track, I could take that version and play it and then have the other version to listen to at home. So don't be afraid to release 2 edits of a track, or because that was my biggest mistake for so long. I put out these like 6-minute epic odysseys, and I could have split each of those into a couple of really dope tracks and had people focus on them and remember them more. So really, and then as far as like mix wise, like a lot of your basic inclinations are great and the textures are great. I don't really hear any problems. I would like maybe just focus in on tightening up the sub and the low end just a teeny bit, and just really micro going in and looking at some of the low mids. I hear just a tiny amount of muddiness, but again, this is micro feedback because all your elements are really great. And melodically, I wouldn't change a thing except, like I said, to maybe split it into 2 different pathways to the track. So amazing. Next, we have Israel, who I haven't seen in so long. It's so good to see you back. One of my OG EDMP kids. We're going to play his whip right now and check it out. Wow. I really like the way that your chords in the intro and outro make me feel. Feels very warm and comforting and like, man, you might want to consider doing some more writing for commercials and licensing, because I tell you, that made me feel like I should go buy home insurance, should hug my parents, but like in a good way, not in a crappy way. Like I actually felt like I just had my heartstrings tugged, is what I mean. And I could easily be manipulated to do something else. This is kind of a special thing for me to listen to because Israel, like I said, is one of the OG EDMP kids, and I've sort of watched him develop pretty much since day one of running the server. It's been 3 years now, and he came with his mom to a show that I was playing at, and I got to meet him. And then he actually helped with some horns and things like that on a licensing album that I did, and I hired him to do that because he's quite a talented musician as well. So it's really special for me to hear this, Israel, and hear how you've grown. And I'm so happy to have you kind of back in action. I was worried that you weren't making music because I hadn't heard anything from you. And I can tell, obviously, I can hear what a special melodic ear that you have. And I love it. As we've been saying in the chat, it sort of drags on a little bit, and it's just, like I think there are just certain styles that lend themselves better to lengthy sort of things, like if you're listening to classic house or techno, and a lot of the time people are DJing that on 3 decks, so they have a lot longer progressions. And it's totally like I used to do that too. I used to make 6-minute tracks, and I still do if it's right. But I feel like for future bass or like this kind of energetic style, a lot of what makes it exciting and listenable is the quick pace of it all. And that's actually, I learned a lot from working with Frost, because when we met, I made 6-minute tracks and he made 2-minute, 20-second tracks. And I used to just be like, that's too short. I don't know what to do. And he would say, actually, I feel like everything that needs to be said is said like that. And I think as well, your strength of your composition is based on the melodic motifs and the harmonies and the whole picture. Like you're not necessarily doing some kind of crazy noisia type of sound design, in which case, I feel like you could do a longer section if you were doing really complicated, weird changes and stuff. But because it's I don't want to say simple, but it's like it's chord focused, it's big, it's epic, it's emotional. Like you almost want to just not keep drawing it out, because you can't peak if you don't come down, right? So I think that if I were you, this is what I do. I literally just chop each section in half when I feel like it's too long, and I'll save another version, but then I'll play it through and go, did I really need that? And it's kind of like decluttering, where you kind of have to look at it and go, all right, how am I without it? Am I making everything work? Okay, well, I guess I didn't really need it in the first place. So that being said, I would also say that you need to maybe work on sort of what you would call the chest punch, like the high part of the kick drum, the mid-range. I think that you're missing some of that, because unlike the other track that I just listened to, I hear some low end, I hear some bottom end, and it has like a hint of being punchy, but it's not hitting me in that thump spot. It's not hitting me in the chest, which is kind of like that wow factor. Because if you don't have any low end, no one's going to dance. But if you don't have that like thumping in the chest, I feel like you lose impact. And that is something like you can look at different things. Like one of the things I might try practicing a little bit more in your track is parallel compression. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's also called New York style compression. And I started doing that on drums a lot when I wanted to not win the loudness war, but I wanted that crisp, punchy sound. So what I would do is send my drum bus partially, not entirely, into a compressor, add some saturation, turn the compressor up really high so that if you were to just listen to it, it's like insane, overcompressed, super loud. Then turn the mix of that signal back in. So I would still have the delicacy and the dynamic range, because I know, Israel, just knowing you personally, that you're an orchestrator as well, so you're sensitive to that. So I can get that you probably are avoiding the overcompression game, which is good. But I think that you can still bring your track up to that punchy feeling without going into the overcrunch loudness war, possibly by using stuff like parallel compression. So, even on things like your pads, one of the things that Admiral commented on is he thought that your envelope on your chords was too drastic. I think that if you did a little bit of compression on it, perhaps parallel or perhaps just more compression overall, you wouldn't get such a severe volume thing, which is what's making it really extreme. Like you could still get the feeling of the envelope, but just tighten it a little bit so it's not so like, oh my God, every time it hits. So that's what I'd say about that, but I think it's solid work. Also, I would almost maybe think about introducing another element in the second drop just to give it some variety because it's very clean and big, but I think if you added like an interesting lead solo over the second part, I'm doing this as if like it's making sound, but that's like my vibe when I play the guitars. I'm just like trying to create a little high crazy element that that sits on top and doesn't necessarily take attention like a normal lead because you have the chords. Like you don't want to make some, don't get me wrong, like so you don't want to make a big clashy fat lead that's gonna make people try to decide where to put their attention. That's not what I'm saying. I just think you need an additional element to create interest. Probably like you could easily, have let's see, like this. Like just something, because to me it almost sounds like you either want a vocal there, which would be tough because you have such big pads, or you want an accent. So I feel like I'm begging, like my ears are begging to hear some kind of like progression or lead or variation from that. So that would be my other thing to take home. All right, next we're gonna listen to Donko. I don't know if he's actually listening, but he messaged me earlier, and it's called Happy Go Plucky. All right, I like puns. I'm into puns in track titles. Happy Go Plucky. I just want you guys to all know, for anyone who isn't in the chat, this is his first song ever. Huge props. Huge props. honestly, I'm honestly just flabbergasted because DJ Donko here has told me that this is his first track, which to me is like, you must be lying, bro. I mean, I know you're not. I'm just kidding with you, but honestly, my first track was nowhere near that good. Like, this is honestly, I would like, for being your first track, I would give this an 11 out of 10 because look, I teach students at a lot of levels, and one of the things that's the hardest to teach is how to construct a cohesive idea, like how to envision an intro, a build up, a drop. And I can definitely hear that, like, for being your first track, you have an incredible grasp on how to put a track together. That's something I don't usually hear when people have just started. Usually there's a lot of unfinished ends. And honestly, to me, that sounds like a complete cohesive idea that just needs to be better. And it's hard for me to even give you advice because I think that those things are just going to come with time and experience. Like, as other people said, oh, your piano plugin is whatever, but you're going to collect more piano libraries and you're going to figure out how to do that. The main thing that I would focus on, I guess, like, I feel like I should give you more general advice on where to put your energy because I would be proud to show that to anybody. Let's say this is my first track. Like, really unbelievable. What I would focus on now, since you seem to have a pretty good grasp of ideas, is just really working on your mixing and your sound design a little bit because this is a really common thing that happens to people. They work so hard on everything overall, and then their mixing is the last thing that they do. And what happens is you end up getting this crazy burnout because you have an idea, it takes you a long time as it is to make it, and then by the time you get to the point where you've spent 100 hours on it and it still sounds kind of lame, you deflate, you lose steam. So I think that one of the things I've learned a lot, and again from working with Frost, he mixes as he goes and he's really focused before he even gets his idea out. He's like starting to use crazy mixdown plugins and get his kick and snare dialed. And I used to think, okay, I'm going to compose one day and I'm going to mix another day. But I think with electronic music, it's not a good process because, for one, a lot of the process is mixing and creative ways of dealing with processors. For two, everything about music is so mental and emotional when it comes to just taking it over the edge. And as a producer, I say the same thing about DJs. If you're DJing and you're looking bored, how can you make anyone else happy? If you're a producer and you're not happy and excited about making your own music, and it doesn't have to be positive music, like you can be happy and excited about making like killer Norwegian death metal murdercore. It's the energy. If you keep that energy up, that I really believe that translates. And so my point of my rambling is, if you work really hard on getting basic mixing stuff done, then not only will you have less to do at the end, but you'll be taking your tracks further because you're just by default going to be more excited. So I think for you, the first area I would work on is your drums. They're a little bit awkward. And what do I mean by awkward? You have a kick hitting, you have a snare hitting. Now, the pros and cons of electronic music, right? When you're making like acoustic stuff or rock, if you're recording a rock band, you have a drum kit. The drum kit exists in a room. Somebody plays that kit. So like it or not, you have a cohesive sound, and your job as an engineer is just to make it sound better and to, augment what's already there. In electronic music, you don't have those limitations. You can do anything you want. You can use a kick from this guy and a snare from this guy and a fart as a hi-hat if you really want to. But the problem with that is a lot of people don't pay mind to, like, does this fit cohesively? Like, we can have a different vibe on every instrument, but is it blending together into a point where people are just noticing the beat and not noticing, oh, like this is what I was noticing, is this snare is kind of strange. It sort of sticks out. It doesn't seem to blend with the kick. And every time the kick and the snare sort of go back and forth, I feel like I'm watching somebody stumble. And there's a few different ways that you can attack that, right? You can really play with overall drum bus processing, which is what I was saying to Israel. Like play with very delicate use of reverbs to keep a unified space. You can pay a lot of attention to just the type of sounds you're doing, because you might want to be weird, and you can totally be weird, but one of the caveats to being weird is you have to understand the rules, I think, to break them well, right? And one of the things is like, let's say the guy who does a lot of work for Drake, I don't remember his name, Noah something or other, he does this lo-fi stuff that everybody loves about Drake, but he doesn't actually just make crappy sounding beats. He makes very well engineered stuff that has been carefully crafted to be lo-fi. It's kind of like that pair of expensive ripped jeans. Like somebody stood there and spent many hours ripping those jeans so they looked nice. So what do I mean by this? Is that if you're going to use a bunch of crazy drums and be avant-garde, you still have to really focus on understanding how they fit together, how you can make it cohesive, how you can make it make sense. So I would really focus for now on learning the basics of compression and EQ, because those are two tools that you're going to use all the time for the rest of your producing career. And they're also going to help you make your drums sound a lot better. Like I can tell right off the bat, if you roll some of the low end off your snare, just slightly, you're going to clear up some more space, and the snare's not just going to sort of hit you in the face in this very awkward way. If you EQ your kick a little bit, that will also make it fit better. So focus on that and really just getting your basic kick and snare to sound good. And I feel like once you do that, you're going to get extra energy. You're going to, you're going to know how the rest of your track fits together a little better, because like it or not, in dance music, a lot of it is everything else is kind of mixed around the drums and the kick. Now, the style that you're making obviously is very different than what I make, and it definitely relies a lot less on the low end. So stylistically, obviously, there's going to be some differences in the choices that you and I would make. But I think that it still goes, you still want to have well-placed drums. You still want to get everything sitting just right. And then, everyone is saying work on your sound design. I kind of I agree, but to a point, don't get so myopic about sound design that you forget to work on your mixing, because it's very easy to go down the rabbit hole of being like, I made 32 awesome serum patches today, but I don't really know what to do with them when I haven't made a track. So I think it's a little bit of a balance between getting a great mix going from the start, getting your energy up, and really focusing on also how your drums play together. That was one other thing I was going to say, is that there are ways that you can make a kick and a snare be part of the same stereo field and picture, without changing the even sound. Like, for instance, one of the little basic tricks that I first learned as a producer was if you take a little riser going whoosh, sweeping upwards, and you sweep it right into the snare, there are certain types of beats like where it can really give it that moving vibe. It'll be like boom, whoosh, boom, whoosh, and it just gives it that little extra push and pull, which is something that I am obsessed with in music. Push and pull, or tension, or interaction, or space. There's so many different dimensions that you can express that in. But how are your kick and snare pushing and pulling? Because even if you're making big room, you could still be having that interplay between the kick and the snare, making them make sense. Okay, so guys, if you want me to keep going much longer, I only have one other thing to listen to. So otherwise, I'm going to play my last thing, which is, hold one moment. I'm going to just move this and load Nathaniel's thing in private and talk for a second, because I guess I accidentally closed my entire browser. Way to go. How many engineers does it take to run a Chrome and webcam streaming session? Sorry, Nathaniel. I'm reloading your track right now. Nathaniel, one of our own staff, known for his eclectic synthwave. He is putting himself under the roast machine, which, let's face it, Admiral's the roaster. I'm really the mom. But let's check out Nathaniel as soon as my SoundCloud loads. Here, we're gonna make our own EDM beatbox. Oh, it's coming. I can see it thinking. Oh boy. My gosh, fiber internet is slow. Okay. Wow, this is cool as well. Just to go back into storytelling mode, Nathaniel Wyvern here, he's another OG Discord member. He's been a mod for almost the whole time since I've been here. And I'm super, super stoked watching him progress as well. And I definitely think, wow, my immediate comment that I want to say to you is, and this may be useless to you, so I apologize, but you've outgrown your headphones. Like you've actually learned a lot about production at this point, and you're getting better at it, and you're trying new tricks. And now I'm starting to hear like what I would hear about somebody who doesn't have good headphones. Like maybe they're okay, but there's a real difference. Like I know just knowing you personally that you don't have a fancy treated studio or something, and most people don't, and that's okay. But um, one of the things that happened when I got these headphones, which are my crazy Sennheisers and one of the biggest investments I've ever made, was I just started hearing these tiny details in the stereo field, these tiny highs. And I'm listening to all of your guys' whips on these headphones. So it's pretty intense. It's kind of like getting a cold shower because you just hear all these shocking little tiny high-end things that I think most headphones you can't even hear. Like I have these Beyerdynamic 880s or whatever. They're constantly cited as being decent mixing headphones. And Frost is using them right now. And I'll tell you, when I go from this room to his, it's like I've gone to earbuds. So this may be beyond your control, but it's kind of a compliment because no, I think I have the 880s, not the 770s. There's two different models. Yes, please. But essentially, I just think that I'm hearing you do a lot of cool things, Nathaniel, and now like even your mix is just it's off in such small ways that it's like ways that I probably wouldn't notice if I was listening on different headphones. But I think if you just overall just really go through your low mid region with a fine tooth comb, you're gonna find tiny things. And again, you can use analyzers, you can use referencing, and sometimes when you're in a less than ideal mixing situation, you can get good results by making it even less ideal. Like some common things that I've always done was like go out of this door, half close the door, and listen to the song with my back to the door. So what you can put yourself in these purposely worse environments, because what happens then is if anything's sticking out, it'll really stick out then. So I would say really play with your reference environments more, like even if you don't have a lot of options, like get in a friend's car or like ask somebody to use their earbuds or any kind of thing, because what I'm hearing now is just very small interferences in the low mids, and you're doing this cool kind of fusion now between, like, I guess I would call it like psychedelic trance and synthwave. So around 240, like near the end of the track, I heard some really cool stuff happening, and I don't know, or sorry, no, it's 240 long. It's more like, let me find it. Sorry, like 215. So this part here, something about it, whatever you're doing, it pumps a little harder and it has a little more bite than the rest of the track. So I don't know, I can't pinpoint exactly what you're doing differently, but this part here, like if I was to guess, I would almost say that you were sidechaining it harder than earlier, but that's probably not what you're doing because that's a weird thing to do. So whatever distortion automation, he says in the chat. So whatever you're doing there, do it more and do it earlier, because like even in that part, even though you're, obviously there's still minor things that you're mixing, it's like I don't notice them as much because you have such a cool, pumping, energetic vibe going on with your distortion automation as it may. So I would say like bring it in. Because here's the thing, like people's attention spans suck, and people usually want you to just hit them over the head initially. So, and I've done this many times, believe me. I've made so many tracks where like the second to last section, or like what I would call the rollout part, is the dopest section of the whole track. And there are tracks that I've released like that. And you know what I do? I go play them out live and I set a cue point for the last like 1 minute of the track, and I just drop that and I loop it and I loop it and I loop it because I can see that it gets so much more effective vibe from people. So in music, in electronic music, do not save your best for last. You can save a different best for last. You can have more than one best part of a track. You can have great drops, but definitely don't wait till the end to get that feeling, because that, like, I honestly just, like, something changed in my ears. Like, I was listening and I was like, this is cool. It's got a few minor low mid issues. And then all of a sudden 2 minutes and 15 seconds came around and I was like, oh, okay, I want to move now. Because people people have all kinds of weird reasons why they like music. Like, something really interesting that all of you can do is to start like asking people that you know that aren't making music at all, why do you love this track? And it's really interesting response, especially when you're talking about non-vocal music, because with vocal music often people are like, oh, I love the lyrics, oh, I like loved this song in high school and like hearing these words make me feel something. But with electronic music, it's a lot harder to put into words why it makes you feel that way. And what I've learned from, and again, I'm speaking in a dance music context. It doesn't apply to people who love experimental noise or ambient. I'm just talking about beats. But the majority of people I know, when you ask them, like, what is it? They will fumble for a while and they'll come up with something about, like, it just grabs me. It just catches me. And they're very physical descriptors. And just to go a little off topic, I've studied a lot of different models of psychology and thinking. It kind of runs in my family, long story. But one of the things that stuck with me when I learned neurolinguistic programming, which is something they use in marketing, but it's also something that you can use as a communication tool to help how you communicate with people. And one of the things you learn is that people have different representational systems for memory. So there are people who are more visual, there are people who are more auditory, and there are people who are more kinesthetic. And all of us use all of these systems to remember and to make things meaningful, but people are more dominant with others. And you can usually tell somebody who's very sporty and physical and loves to dance is probably going to be more kinesthetic. Somebody who's kind of more in their head, they could be more into, lyrics. And I find it really interesting about that. But my point is that with dance music, a lot of the time, no matter what system that person may use, it will come back to using these feeling descriptors. Is like melting my face and like grabbing and catching and throwing. So that's why stuff like extreme sidechaining is so popular. That's why people make things pump and move, because it's a subconscious message to your brain. You need to start moving too. It's almost like, when you see someone yawn and you want to yawn too, because you've just given your brain that suggestion of yawning. Well, if you give these people's brains suggestion of pumping, that is automatically just going to make them want to move. And it was really dramatic to me, like not actually being able to tell what you were doing, but just all of a sudden, 2 minutes into your track, that changes and I get that feeling. So I would do that if I were you. Yeah, you see, Lil Sheet is listening in. ¿Qué tal, amigo? Big shouts out. And he said he just yawned by hearing the word yawn. And that is a thing. You can hear someone yawn over the phone and you can yawn. Anyways, we're humans. We are susceptible. That is why things like hypnosis are a thing. I mean, that's an agreement that you enter into to give your mind over to be manipulated, because we operate on this subconscious level. So maybe think about, when you make music, what kind of messages are you sending people beyond what they can pick apart that they're hearing? Because let's face it, like, I can sit here and give you feedback, and if we're all being honest, 90% of your listeners will never notice a lot of these things because they're going to listen in iTunes on earbuds. But I think our responsibility as creators is to really understand how musical motifs and audio manipulation translate in that psychological context. So if you're actually thinking about how does like my music suggest people to feel in an implicit way, not an explicit way, because we can all be obvious. That's easy. But if you can do something subtle, like the push and pull, like I said, side chaining, making people move is the easiest example I can think of. But there's all kinds of things. Without going too much into music theory, there are certain chord progressions that they say resolve. goes back to the root note. It makes you feel complete. If you do a chord progression and you don't resolve back to a logical note, the person will have that feeling of hanging on. In film, they use these cliffhangers where they'll end an episode where you're like, oh, I need to know what happens. I'm going to keep watching. So remember that music is just another emotional, subconscious manipulation of humanity in a way. And think about what you want to do in that way. So that being said, I don't have any more whips, and I've definitely gone super abstract and weird here. So if you're still watching, thank you. I hope I have entertained you at least a little bit. And I really hope all of you guys enter the contest because, again, we're here to have fun. We're here to connect. We are a community. I'm so proud to be working with all you guys and have watched you all develop over the last 3 years. Some of you have honestly become like just close to my heart. And every single person that I interact with means a lot to me. So please come and join us in the competition, or don't enter the competition and just come hang out. Still love you. And look forward to a lot of other streams. I'm working on a really exciting new project with a bunch of amazing artists. I don't want to say too much because I'm really psyched about it, but it involves everything that you can think of: tutorials, live streams, comedy skits, and visual arts classes, boiler room type parties, whatever. Just keep looking out. And part of the reason I'm doing these streams is to show you that I'm out here, we out here. There's a lot of us doing it. Don't feel alone. Music is the means to fulfillment, in my opinion. And have an awesome night, everyone. I love you.